So basically the thing that I wanted to talk about was that, I've been going around to all the occupied sites, not all of them, many of them. And I've been learning some very interesting things from people, what has brought them to, become, as it were, agitated, that is activated, to join into something which is risky, to join into something which we're not sure what it will bring, what the future portends. There are easy demonstrations, and then there are things like this where it's not guaranteed what one is up against, or what the meaning of it will be. And in history, there are always examples of such kind of brave moves, to try to break through in time, make something different happen. So what I found, on the other hand, I know that that's the broad theme that people say. We came here because we were discomforted by, say, the ultra wealthy and then the distress in our communities. But everybody has a narrative of why they came, and I found it interesting. In some places it's homelessness, and in Boston, of course, the principal theme are things like student debt. These are big themes for what is disquieting people. I've talked to several people who are carrying $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 of debt. It's an enormous burden. I know. And no, these are people who had not finished their degree. If you finish your degree, it's 60, 80,000. Of course, the United States has just clocked $1 trillion in debt. So this system is crazy. It's not in balance, and the thing I was thinking about a lot the last couple of days when I read that we had crossed $1 trillion is how wrong it is for us to be educating people, when these are the conditions by which they are being educated. In other words, the great frustration for me has been that I cannot seem to, force students to I feel like in a classroom, for instance, people say to me, we want to take your class, we want to learn this stuff, but we need to actually spend our time doing something productive. In other words, that's going to lead to a career. And it's not that, therefore, people are not interested in history, or they're not interested in literature, they're not interested in art. It's just that this pressure of student debt is reducing their horizon for being free, for being able to liberate themselves at least for 4 years while they are studying. There are so many pressures on people so young that something is wrong. We cannot say we live in a free society when we are forcing young people to think about careers when they are just entering college at age 18. They've constrained their sense of possibilities already. So these are enormous challenges that are faced in the country, and I think when you agglomerate all the grievances that people have, this is what we get. We get finally people saying, I'm not interested in this kind of system any longer. Of course, it's not 99% versus 1%. In my mind, the 1% certainly have taken all the wealth. I discovered from an excellent project that I belong to called the National Priorities Project. We've been crunching some numbers, and some of the things the people at National Priorities Project have found are obscene. The greatest obscenity they discovered was that this year the 1% got tax cuts. The total tax cut to the 1% is equal to the total income earned by the 99% last year. That means the 99%, the total income, the 99% last year, what they earned is equal to the tax cut that the 1% got this year in tax day. That is an obscenity. That the tax cut was greater than the total income of the rest of society. Obviously that is obscene. Obviously this has raised the question to the surface of that incredible inequality. But the problem isn't the 1%. The problem is the 100%. The problem is the system. It's not that they are greedy, and if they become less greedy, suddenly we'll be able to live better lives. This is not about greed. Greed is the wrong word. This is the way we have allowed the system to be organized, where very few people control all the property and very few people have power over public policy. It's not about greed. Some of these people might actually be magnanimous. They may be the nicest people. This is not a personality test. This is not about 99% of us having the best personalities and 1% having a shitty personality. Because let me tell you, among the 99%, lots of us have crappy personalities. This is not about personality. This is not about Generosity. Many of us are not generous people. But that's not the point. The point is not personality. This is not about psychology. This is about economics and politics. This is about power. This is about very few people having the right to dominate property and having control over all powerful decision making. Hence, because of that, if you go back and you look at American history from the 1870s onwards, you will discover that the powerful and the properties have never allowed social spending in this country to increase above 14.5%. There's a 14.5% barrier, 14.5% of the gross domestic product. There's a 14.5% barrier which they don't allow public policy to cross. In other words, there's only so much money that can be spent to public transportation, public health, public well-being, public roads, public this, public that. 14.5% is the limit. They have decided in their collective 100-year wisdom that the correct way to balance the boom and bust cycle in the economy is not through social spending. When there's a financial crisis, you don't spend in the society. You don't increase public spending. You don't increase spending to education. What they have decided to do, what the data demonstrates to us, is that in this country, counter-cyclical spending, spending when times are rough, happens through military spending, not through social spending. So in the DNA of this system, militarism is at the heart of it. This is a military state. In other words, this system emphasizes military spending over social spending. The reason that that is better for the 1% who control power and property is that if you provided social spending, if we had to sit in public transport together, if we had to get public health together at public health clinics, if all of us went to public education together, we would develop a sense of social solidarity. Social solidarity is the thing that the 1% do not want you to have. They do not want you to sit in General Assembly and have discussions. They don't want you to meet each other. What they want is you to have an utterly privatized existence. Sitting in your car, sitting in your cubicle, sitting in, eating lunch by yourself, eating dinner at home, everybody watching a different TV set, everybody had a computer. Steve Jobs killed social life. Everybody with their damn machines at all times. You understand? This system is premised on private life, not on public engagement. There is no money for public. In fact, most of these spaces are not public. They are owned by private entities. This is owned by a bank. They cut a deal with cities. They say, we will build a big building and we'll put 3% of the land area will be grassed. But these are ghastly spaces. These are not spaces that, say, let's go sit down and have a chat. Okay, these are not welcoming spaces. If you behave badly, the security will come out and say, go away. So our lives, our system has produced lives that are deeply privatized. There is no public space. In other words, the way this 14.5% trigger works is it privatizes our lives socially. It makes us retreat into our own spaces. We drive our own cars. We don't use public transport. We go to schools where we don't meet other people. We have healthcare, which is, in a certain kind of clinic, not public health where everybody can walk in. Our spaces of interaction are decreased. Secondly, money goes to the military. Massive amounts of money. We have overcapacity in the military. We have over 100 countries in the world that house United States bases. We have ongoing wars, not just Iraq and Afghanistan. Please don't forget, we have an ongoing war in Korea. That war has not ended. It is ongoing. It's never going to end. We have pretty much ongoing war against Iran. If you travel to Iran and talk to anybody, they'll talk to you about Mohammad Mossadegh, 1953. The coup engineered by Kermit Roosevelt, nephew of FDR, Kermit Kim Roosevelt. You like the name Kim? Kim from Rudyard Kipling's Kim. Kermit Roosevelt, the great spy out of Rudyard Kipling's great game Fantasies, uses $1 million to overthrow a democratically elected head of state in Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh. That war has never ended. Every Iranian, what do they think about? They don't think about 78, 79 revolution. They think about Mohammad Mossadegh. Some hikers cross over accidentally or whatever it may be into Iran. They are captured. Why? Mohammad Mossadegh. There's always paranoia. These are unfinished wars. We have a military fundamentally overcapacity. It needs to be used. United States runs into a serious financial problem in the 1970s. A financial problem that is unresolved. After 1973, wages have not risen. Real wages have not risen in the United States. Real wages are stagnant since 1973 or thereabouts. That was the end of the American epoch, 1973. That was the end. To adjust for that, to prevent us coming to terms with that ending, we had a financial system that released credit to the people. You know, especially after the Volcker shock, which screwed the rest of the world up, but they released credit, created asset bubbles, artificially allowed the American dream to continue for 30 more years. But this has not been an upcycle, actually, because wages have remained stagnant. There has been no boom for most people. This is an entirely artificially credit-induced boom. It is a fake boom from 1973, particularly in the 1990s. These were inflated asset bubbles, playing with monetary policy, allowing us to imagine that we actually could continue the American dream. And in this period, the way the United States has been able to allow us to continue the American dream was militarism. Anytime China begins to rise, the United States government will start threatening China. Instead of trying to actually change the relationship between China and the United States, we want to militarily enforce the switch. How? We threaten them by saying you should revalue your currency to our advantage. We use political and military power to threaten countries like China. Militarism is the heart of how the so-called American dream is being sustained. But what does this mean for those thousands of people who have been killed in the wars? And I mean Americans, I don't mean the rest. Those thousands, no American dream for them. No American dream for the tens of thousands who are wounded, have post-traumatic stress, etc. No American dream for them or for their families, or for the people who they come back home and beat or kill. Very high rates of in-home violence from people who have returned from war. No treatment, no concern. You know, we are patriotic when we send people to war, but there's no patriotism when they return. They are sent back to sleep on the streets. This is the heart of the militarized economy. It's not just 1% greedy, screwing over the 99%. It's a system that is leading us to permanent war, utilizing warfare as a way to build the American dream onward. But it's a mirage, and it's not going to work anymore. There's going to be no more asset bubble that they can inflate. Currently, the two biggest asset bubbles that are inflated and are going to burst, and if you're in finance, I recommend that you take a margin against these. One is personal debt, currently standing at $2.4 trillion. American personal debt and credit card debt is going to collapse. So if I were you, I would short those. Second, student debt, $1 trillion now. $1 trillion in student debt. The best place to enter the market and short that as well. There is a lot of money going to be made out of great distress in the population. This system is now collapsed. It is not 1% that is doing well and 99% doing badly. It is 100% failed. It needs an utterly new solution. We need new ideas. We need a new way to think about how to reorganize the system. No more saying just give us some more. They don't know how to give anything. They are not capable of giving anything. All they have been capable of in the last 30 years is repression. Either bombing overseas or police brutality at home. They have no other language. They are not capable of sharing. What we need to demand is not one reform, another reform, a little of this, a little of that. We need to start demanding the impossible. Because only the impossible is going to allow us to survive. Ta-da!